Salutations, respected viewers. This is George from Ireland. This video is about President Trump's decision to cancel military aid to Pakistan, and it's a decision for which I applaud President Trump. Not words you'll hear coming out of my mouth too frequently. So, a bit of background. Well, the Islamic Republic of Pakistan had a close military relationship with the United States since the 1950s. They cooperated all through the Cold War. US policy there was skewed towards it in Pakistan and against India, just to get bases 100 kilometers or so closer to the border with the Soviet Union. Pakistan was a military dictatorship for half its history, whereas India was a democracy. And the other problem for the Americans is that India had a significant communist party, which controlled a few state governments. Anyway, the ISI is Pakistan's inter-services intelligence, as in there was army intelligence, naval intelligence, and air force intelligence, and even the foreign ministry did some intelligence. So way back in, I think it was the 70s, the Pakistani government said, all right, let's just have one overarching intelligence agency. It'll take intelligence from all the others, bang their heads together, because they weren't always cooperating due to inter-services rivalry. So the ISI is fairly effective, and intelligence is vital to Pakistan, which has got at best a strained relationship with India due to the Jammu and Kashmir dispute and other things. So the Taliban was founded in the early 90s. The Soviet army had pulled out of Afghanistan. There was a bloody turmoil in Afghanistan. Taliban, meaning students, was set up, and it was an ultra-reactionary Islamist organization. Remember, in Afghanistan, about 90% of the population are Sunni Muslims. There are a few Shias and a very few people of other faiths. So the Taliban were sort of medieval Muslims, not ordinary Muslims, or certainly not liberal Muslims. And it soon won control of the country. But won't go through all the machinations. But then 9/11 came, they were defeated, they were driven to the extremities, they've come back, they occupy half the country now. So the Taliban exists in Pakistan as well as in Afghanistan, and the Taliban has killed thousands of Pakistanis. Why on earth would the ISI back up the Taliban? And it's indubitable that certainly at least elements of the ISI have assisted the Taliban. The United States has been saying this for easily 10 years. There are multiple examples of it, and them feeding intelligence to the Taliban to help them attack NATO forces in Afghanistan. Well, one thing is the Taliban is not very united. It's a brand name to some extent. It's a bit like the Mujahideen back in the 1980s. It's an umbrella term for several factions within it, and indeed there are tensions within the Taliban. They don't entirely agree on policy or ideology. There's some opportunistic criminals who go along with the Taliban. Like in any anarchic situation, it's difficult to tell who is a true believer in the cause or who is just a brigand who mouths a few slogans for the sake of legitimizing what would be otherwise outright crime. So yes, the Taliban does kill Pakistanis a lot. Who are these Pakistanis they tend to kill? They quite often kill the Shia minority. So about 15% of Pakistanis are Shia, including Benazir Bhutto, who was killed by the Taliban. So most Pakistanis are Sunni Muslims. Two denominations with this in Islam, Sunni and Shia. It's a bit more complicated than that, but those are the two major denominations. And the Taliban are extreme Sunni to the extent that they are violently anti-Shia. There are also Ahmadis within Pakistan. They broke off mainstream Islam in the 19th century under the British Raj because they came up with a new prophet. And mainstream Muslims say to Ahmadis, you are not Muslims, you're not allowed to call yourself that, your place of worship is not a mosque, and so forth. They're regarded as apostates. And there's a Christian minority, and so on. So the Pakistanis who get killed by the Taliban quite often belong to these religious minorities, or else they're Sunnis of a more liberal outlook. And yes, they've sometimes fought against the Pakistani army. And by the way, the ISI and the army do not always get along. The ISI is a deep state, if ever there was one. So Pakistan has been like Prussia in the 19th century, when it was said that Prussia is not a state with an army, it's an army with a state. Or Pakistan is like a modern-day Sparta, in a sense. Don't like to be impolite about Pakistan, but I have to tell the plain truth. And the many Pakistanis I like, not anti-Pakistani at all. I just feel sorry for them because the country is highly dysfunctional. It's improved in some regards. But the military and the ISA are the only things that work and command universal respect. So Obama and Hillary Clinton, they both announced that they knew that at least elements within the ISA are supporting the Taliban actively with arms, with weapons, feeding them useful information, teeing up American units for ambush in Afghanistan. The USA obviously didn't share a lot of intelligence with Pakistan because they suspected we passed on to the Taliban by rogue elements or indeed official ISI policy. There's a limit to the extent that the civilian government can control the ISI. Remember, Benazir Bhutto hinted this when democracy was restored in 1998, better not cut the military budget or it'll invite martial law because it provoked another military putsch. So Trump warned them previously, and Pakistan has not been playing ball. Here I've got to, for once, admire Trump for plain speaking. And why on earth would the USA continue to give weapons or money for military equipment to Pakistan? Some of that is going to be handed over to the Taliban. Maybe not the weapons that the United States has given, but Pakistan will say, we've got these new, whatever it is, so we don't need the old firearms or whatever it is, and hand those over to the Taliban. The Pakistanis try not to be too blatant about it, have to be a tiny bit discreet, but it's been happening on such a scale that they couldn't be entirely surreptitious about it. Have to consider the possibility that this could aggravate the problem. So many supplies for the NATO forces come through Pakistan by truck, and the Taliban were threatening to kill the drivers. The drivers were often saying, all right then, I'll give you the truck and you can just destroy it. So at times Pakistan has cut off supplies to the NATO forces. So the USA could supply itself by air, flying through Central Asian countries, but that's obviously a lot costlier. They're not going to be allowed over Iranian airspace. So the United States still can prosecute its war against the Taliban, but it would be a lot more expensive. So that makes the problem worse, therefore, and obviously American will to fight in Afghanistan is flagging. Now, how could Pakistan be pressurized into not assisting the Taliban? Well, you can make Pakistan worry about India a bit more. Their rival, I think they've got a very long border. Pakistan is very long north to south, not very deep east to west. So its military doctrine is entirely offensive-minded, as in the country is undefensible, certainly if attacked from the east. India is forging relations with Afghanistan on a very friendly basis. They had an amicable relationship with the communist government in Afghanistan in the 80s. So they would like to do that again. And there were times when Indian empires extended into Afghanistan. So why does the ISI assist the Taliban? Well, several reasons. Partly ethno-linguistic ties. The Khyber Pakhtunkhwa is the northwest province of Pakistan. And those people there, they're speaking Pashto, like the Pashto-speaking Taliban people usually. They're often family ties. They're often cousins, literally. There's a Durand line, which is the poorest border. Now, Afghanistan's been an independent country for centuries, although obviously Pakistan is not. And its borders are waxed and waned. Some of what Pakistan was Afghanistan once. There's partly their ideology, their reactionary interpretation of Islam. And Pakistan can have a great deal of sway in Afghanistan by supporting the Taliban. The Taliban do their bidding, or indeed they can pressurize Kabul, the Afghan government, to do what Islamabad wants, otherwise we'll up support for the Taliban. So there are various reasons like that. Moreover, it's very difficult for Islamabad to get off the tiger's back, because having created this beast, what you're going to do, it could easily turn against you if you don't, and the Taliban have showed that by setting off bombs sometimes. Anyway, as I say, Pakistan could be pressurized by upping the ante with India. So we're going to give military aid to India, and we would raise no objection if India were to attack you, something like that. So the ISA would quite like Afghanistan as an adjunct, and obviously they're terrified that Indian military bases might be established in Afghanistan, and that'd be the Pakistani nightmare of encirclement. So the Taliban control about 50% of the territory of Afghanistan. So it seems to be an ignominious failure for NATO, who had some success in driving the Taliban back, but there wasn't sufficient will to resist by NATO. They didn't keep up the campaign, didn't send enough troops, were not willing to have enough people killed, frankly. So the commitment is waning. People are war weary. There often been drawdowns. Trump talking about pulling out altogether. Then he was persuaded to send more troops, but a meeting with the Pakistani president might induce him to change his mind, because Trump is so capricious. I can imagine him tomorrow saying that Pakistan is a great country with a great people and have a great relationship with America and blah, blah, blah. So the Taliban has developed a good relationship with China, Iran, and other countries. Why? They're both sworn enemies of this ideology. Remember, China's got its own separatist Islamist movement amongst the Uyghurs in Xinjiang. The Iranians, by the way, are 90% Shia Muslims, and the Shia minority in Afghanistan has been brutalized by the Taliban. Why on earth would the Islamic Republic of Iran establish an amicable working relationship with the Taliban? Perhaps they recognize the Taliban is winning and they simply have to face the future. The Taliban represents who the people are going to be ruling the country and might as well kiss and make up. It pays to have a decent working relationship with them. So they may well be defeat for NATO in Afghanistan, not really because NATO doesn't have the weapons or the troops, but just is not prepared to fight. This was a long conflict. NATO would have been totally committed, sent hundreds of thousands of troops. It could have been achieved, but that's not happening. So, as I say, it might make the situation worse. Can it make it that much worse? Because giving Pakistan what they want has not paid dividends. Yes, there's sometimes been a little bit of intelligence cooperation, and every time a US president has been meeting a Pakistani president, the Pakistanis would arrest a Taliban guy and hand him over. But they could have done an awful lot more. I do feel sorry for the Pakistani leadership in a sense, because they're in an impossible situation. If they are too cooperative with the United States, they will be ousted in a military coup, and this would be deeply unpopular. They're already accused of being traitors for allowing drone strikes within their territory, for deconflicting certain zones. So that's that. It's not really worth it for the US taxpayer to be giving this military aid to Afghanistan. They get very little return. Pakistan. And Pakistan has created a very good working relationship with China. Might push them further into the Chinese camp. However, for the moment, I think certain firmness is advisable.